When Libya collapsed in 2011, the world was told a simple story. The government fell, the war ended, Libya's assets were secured. End of discussion. But what if that wasn't the full picture? What if Libya's wealth didn't move once, but twice? What if the first transfer was only temporary, and a second, quieter phase happened after the cameras left? No accusations, no dramatic claims, just one uncomfortable question. If everything was already secured, why do the records go silent and then change? This is not a story about what we know. It's a story about what was never explained, what the world was told. In the aftermath of the 2011 war, Western governments assured the public that Libya's overseas assets had been frozen for protection. Gold reserves, foreign accounts, sovereign funds, all secured to prevent misuse during instability. On paper, this sounded responsible. Frozen assets are supposed to remain traceable, auditable, recoverable. Yet, as years passed, Libya's post-war government struggled to access clear records of what existed and where. That's where the story begins to fracture. Because freezing assets doesn't erase them, but something erased the trail, the first movement, documented. There was an initial asset action in 2011, and this part is not disputed. As the war intensified, international financial controls were activated, emergency banking measures were implemented, foreign-held Libyan assets were restricted. This first phase was public. It involved central banks, international regulators, multilateral institutions. There were announcements, there were press briefings, there were official statements, and then nothing. No detailed public inventory followed, no consolidated report was released, which raises a critical issue. Freezing assets is temporary, but years later, Libya still couldn't reconcile its balance sheets. So what happened in between? The gap that shouldn't exist. Here is where timelines matter. Between the fall of Tripoli and the establishment of post-war authorities, there exists a documented silence. No transparent audit, no comprehensive handover, no public confirmation of asset condition. Yet during this same period, new oversight mechanisms were introduced. Additional controls were quietly applied. Certain accounts were reclassified. If everything had already been secured in the first phase, why were new layers added later? That question has never been answered. And unanswered questions don't fade, they accumulate. Why a second movement is even plausible? Let's be clear, a second movement does not mean theft. It does not automatically imply wrongdoing. It means change. And change requires explanation. A second phase could involve reallocation between institutions, transfers between custodians, reclassification under new legal frameworks, emergency relocations due to instability. All of these are legitimate, if documented. The issue is not that movement may have occurred. The issue is that no clear public record confirms or denies it. And when documentation disappears, speculation fills the void. Who would even notice? Libya, after 2011, was not a unified state. It had competing governments, fragmented authority, limited access to international systems. That meant no single body had the power to demand full transparency. Meanwhile, international institutions continued operating normally. So who was tracking Libya's assets on Libya's behalf? That question has never been convincingly answered. When oversight exists without ownership, accountability weakens. And that's where asset trails can fade. If you value careful investigation over headlines, support this work by liking the video and subscribing. It helps keep these questions alive. The return of the question. For years, the issue stayed dormant. Then references began resurfacing. Not accusations, references. Mentions of missing reconciliations, incomplete records, discrepancies between pre- and post-war figures. These weren't shouted in public squares. They appeared quietly in interviews, legal contexts, and archival inquiries. The question returned, not as a claim, but as a concern. If Libya's assets were frozen, unfrozen, and returned, why doesn't the math add up? Why silence is not a denial? When confronted with uncomfortable questions, institutions often respond in one of two ways. They deny or they delay. In this case, the response has been delay. No official denial of a second movement. No confirmation either, just procedural language, jurisdictional complexity, and silence. But silence is not neutral. Silence protects whoever benefits from confusion. Why this matters beyond Libya. This story is bigger than one country. If asset movements during international interventions are not fully documented, trust erodes, precedents form. Future interventions become harder to justify, because protection without transparency is indistinguishable from control, and control without accountability is power unchecked. Comment below, do you think asset transparency should be mandatory after international interventions? Your perspective matters more than official statements. What we can say with certainty. Here is what is undeniable. Libya's assets were controlled externally. Public records remain incomplete. No comprehensive audit has been released. Discrepancies persist years later. Whether there was a second movement or not, the absence of clarity is itself the problem. Transparency is not optional when national wealth is involved. The question still stands. Was there a second asset movement after Libya's collapse? We don't have proof. But we do have gaps, we do have inconsistencies, and we do have silence where clarity should exist. And until those gaps are addressed, the question remains legitimate, not as an accusation, but as a demand for accountability. Because when history refuses to explain itself, it invites scrutiny. If you want more investigations that ask what others avoid, subscribe and turn on notifications. And if you're able, support the channel. It allows us to keep digging, carefully, responsibly, and without fear. Some truths don't shout. They wait.